Who's that guy in that orange shirt? Who must be the fence expert? Who's that guy in that orange shirt? Who must be the fence expert? It's almost time to talk about the fences. It's time to discuss operations and expenses. It's time, it's really time to elevate small businesses. It's time to put Joe to drop his knowledge, it's relentless. This rhyme of mine is getting a bit ridiculous. So here we go, we're live with Joe. Enjoy the show.
What is up, Fence fam? So good to be back with you guys, virtually as it were. Guys, it's been a minute. We haven't been on since before Christmas. How was your Christmas? How was your New Year's? Hope it was good. Hope you got, my granddad used to say, hope you got what you wanted, not what you deserved. So hope you guys had a great one. Guys, we've got a great show lined up for you today. But before we get into it, first and foremost, thank you to Expert Professional Wood Care Products for sponsoring this show. Guys, I've been a customer longer than they've been a sponsor because it's a product that I truly believe in. We use it as a company here. We've used it for forever, it feels like. After using a lot of the other stains that are popular in the market, we felt safest, we felt best with the Expert line of stain. Then we came to know the team. Caleb, Ashley, and the entire team at the Expert facilities have been great to work with. We always love working with them. So if you guys are looking for a stain, if you're using a stain that you're not entirely happy with, I think it'd be worth your while to check out the team over at Expert Professional Wood Care Products. Again, Caleb Ashley and the team would love to take care of you just as well as they take care of me. Thanks, guys, again for sponsoring the live show. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you're listening to a recorded version of a live conversation I host most every Saturday. It's been a few Saturdays, but most every Saturday from 10 a.m. Central to kind of whenever the conversation ends. Usually it's about an hour. Sometimes it goes long. But all in all, I appreciate you listening. If you'd like to participate in the live conversation, head on over to either Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn/Joe Everest. Like I said, we go live most every Saturday from starting at 10 a.m. Central. So we'd love to have you guys here participating in the conversation. With that being said, let's say hello to a few people before we get started that are participating in the live conversation. Jared Burns says, howdy from Texas. Hello, Jared. What is up, Keith? How are you? Morning, gents. Just doing some prep work this morning. The winter blast headed down. That's no kidding. Depending on where you are in the country, you're likely kind of battening down the hatches, getting ready for winter to show up. I know they're calling for some wintry mix to start this afternoon here in southwest Missouri, carry through to tomorrow, 1 to 3 inches of snow, and then highs in the upper teens next week. So hope you guys are doing well. Hope your winter isn't wintering as much as ours is. Caden, welcome in, says it's been great. Caden, I appreciate you for sure. Guys, so Tony was slated to come on. I've got his PowerPoints and we're ready to go, but Tony's having some technical difficulties on his end that we're trying to sort through. It's likely an us problem and not a him problem. We're trying to sort that all out. But until then, guys, let's talk about the forecast, economic forecast, because that's what we're going to talk about, right? So Tony's report is titled "The 2025 Economic Heartbeat of the Industry." Heartbeat of the fence industry. Guys, let me tell you, I previewed it. It doesn't feel right going through it without Tony here to kind of explain it. It's a great report. I hope we can show it to you guys shortly. But until then, let's get into 2025. So from our perspective, from Ozark Fence perspective, again, Southwest Missouri, for what that's worth, it's looking like a pretty strong year. So we closed out. We've actually been closed from Christmas to New Year's. This is our first year, or first week of the new year. I guess it's everybody's first week of the new year. But so we were closed Christmas to New Year's. We took a week of more or less of production time out of it, a little bit more, because we felt good about 2025. Sales were strong. The team absolutely performed incredibly throughout the year. Everyone was due a little bit of a break. And like I say, we felt good about 2025. We felt so good that we felt fine with leaving for a week. Come back in, and I tell you what, so I'm going to give a couple shout outs right now. These are not sponsored shout outs. These are not paid promotions. My salesman and Job Nimbus. One, we had my salesman quotes lined up, fired up the computer Thursday morning, a couple days ago, Thursday morning, and we had my salesman quotes that were ready. They had submitted their layout. It sent it over to Job Nimbus. Job Nimbus automatically, we built automations into it that automatically sent an email and a text scheduling a call. So we had quotes ready to go. We had calls lined up, but also we had 2 quotes that we had submitted last week, and one was the week before, that came through while we were gone over Christmas vacation. So the way the Job Nimbus quote system works is the customer can electronically sign it. We send them the proposal. They can review it. They can click on options. They can electronically sign it. It asks them for a deposit that they can make electronically. We showed up with quotes ready to go, but not only that, we showed up with a couple jobs signed, sealed, deposit in place, ready to schedule. I can't tell you enough good things about these 2 companies because, like I said, we came into the first operating day of 2025 with new business ready to schedule, new quotes ready to go out. It's a pretty good feeling, guys. And think about that people took time. Historically, at least in our market, the week between Christmas and New Year's is the slowest of the entire year. Which tracks, right? So if right after Christmas you've either traveling to family or you've got family coming in, maybe you're like me and my family, you scheduled a vacation on the Christmas break, you're not really plugged in thinking about your fence. Still, we had work come in. So I feel good talking about 2025 in a very positive light. 2024 ended on a very positive note. The last half of 2024, July maybe notwithstanding, July was kind of weird for whatever reason. But like I said, July notwithstanding, the rest of the second half of the year was incredibly strong. We we finished the year very well, and actually we finished December. Our last day of December was on the 24th, with 8 weeks of backlog, which I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I don't think we've ever been backlogged that far in December. So, which makes me feel really good about 2025. I'd love to hear about your guys' outlook for 2025. Check in with a few folks. Craig Eubanks, hey, if you guys aren't watching Fence Guy Friday, what are you doing with your Friday afternoon? I got to know. Check out Craig Eubanks. He's got a great show, Fence Guy Friday. You got to check it out. Excited for an awesome show, as always. Good morning. Good morning, Craig. Appreciate you popping in. Guys, you guys know Clint Iams. Happy 2025 yins. Happy 2025, Clint. I understand the yins, but yeah. Happy 2025 to you as well. Hope it's going good, guys. Guys, drop in the comments below. What do you think 2025 is? How did your 2024 end in your part of the country? And let's talk about 2025 to come. Guys, we killed just enough time to sort out all the technical details, to all the stuff that was going on our back end here. We're getting close to almost being like a real professional show here, because I see, like you guys don't see, but I see right down here is the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, former executive director of the American Fence Association, Tony Thornton. Tony, how are you?
Good morning, Joe. How are you, sir?
I'm doing so well. We apologize for the technical mishaps. Glad to get connected with you.
Hey, I'm not sure. Well, let me be totally transparent, okay? I got stranded this morning without a cell phone, and I just clicked on, okay? So I'm like, I've been panicking. You know, I've been running red lights. I've been speeding. I mean, it was crazy happening this morning, but I guess it worked out, right?
We got it sorted out. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Good morning,
Tony, I tell you what, good morning. I took a sneak peek of your report, and I tell you what, we got to buckle up for this. I think everyone will understand when we get through this, but I want to give you whatever accolades are due. However I can give you the accolades. This report is probably the best economic report for the fencing industry I've ever seen. And we've been through a few years in the fencing industry. How long did it take you to compile the report?
Well, let me back up a little bit. Back in
Sure.
2022, maybe 23. No, it was 22. I did a economic preview for what was upcoming, and really started deep diving into some of these analytics and some of this data. And I just got intrigued. You know, I'm like, this is really powerful data that can help you run your business better.
Yeah.
So I just started researching and looking, but to compile 2025, I've probably got, 10 or 12 hours in it, of just actual time. I got to get the right data. I got to, get off the 10,000 foot elevation. I got to get down in the weeds. And man, I could have made that PowerPoint, 100 slides. So I just had to narrow it down to what, our fence professionals need to hear, need to see, need to understand about what's upcoming for 2025 from my perspective. Y'all blame it all on me if it falls, right on his face. But I think we're in a good spot.
No, I tell you what. After reading the report, I'm incredibly optimistic about. And what's interesting, Tony, so you took it not only at 2025, but you forecast a bit further than that as well. So I thought that was interesting too, to see not only like how we are right now going into 2025, but also kind of how the market feels about beyond 2025 as well.
Absolutely. These projections show where we will be, year 2030, we're looking at 2025, but, year 2030, I mean, that's all relevant. And, what we'll see with this presentation is that over a period of time, especially the last, 10 to 15 years, the fencing industry has maintained about a 4.5, 4.6 growth, maybe a little bit higher in certain markets and margins. But the average is, we've had a 4 to 5% growth every year over year.
Yeah. And that's for the country as a whole, which is important to take a look at, because you hear different markets perform differently. right? So you hear some guys say, hey, 2024 was I don't know that anyone said 2024 was a bad year, but I do know in the summertime, there's a few people that were panicking
Yes.
just because the phone calls had really fallen off. And I think we all got used to pandemic era spending as well, where, for better or worse, I think we got used to that. And now we're having to readjust to maybe whatever the new norm is.
Yeah.
But you hear about people to say, hey, it was okay, it was all right. But then you hear other markets are like, hey, I mean, I'll speak for us. This was our best year ever. And so you hear a lot of that too. And it is kind of confusing to try to figure that out as a whole, right? To try to take these pockets of data. And so what you've done is really kind of compiled everything, put it into one concise report that really tells a story of not only the market in the United States, but you actually expanded that story a little bit further to the worldwide market of fencing as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at it globally. And, I also want to say that I think we have more business owners really focusing on, running their business more efficiently, more profitably for when the downtimes occur. For many, many years, so many people just run it by the seat of their pants, if they got enough money in their bank account to pay the bills, that they're happy. But I think over the last 10 years, especially, the education and the engagement, the camaraderie of people coming together saying, hey, you got to plan for those down times. I call them the ebbs and the flows, right? We've got to be prepared for that. And I do think that our business owners are more prudent in looking at that now than they were. And I think that those people that saw the phone slow down didn't panic. They knew that was going to occur because they had looked at their forecasting. They had seen that this was typical, blame it on an election year, blame it on kids going to school, blame it on whatever you want to. That's the ebbs and flows. But if you forecast and you keep track of this data, you're going to know when to expect that. So maybe you need to pull back on your inventory. Maybe you need to push more inventory in. It's just, isn't this the industry fun?
Well, and maybe you got to push on the marketing accelerator a little bit too. That's the thing is, in the pandemic, I think, or during the pandemic era, I think a lot of us, and I'm guilty of it as well, pulled back our marketing because we had arguably probably more work than we could put together well, right? That we could say, hey, this is going to be 100%, 110%. This is going to be a great fence. You're going to love it. The communication is going to be clear and on time. We probably had a little bit more work than we could fulfill on that promise, right?
Yeah.
So naturally, it's like, well, we've got to pull marketing back, right? And well, at your conference, I gave a talk where the cliff notes is, hey, don't fully pull your foot off the pedal, right? Because it could let somebody kind of leapfrog you and get into the market ahead of you.
Right.
We didn't pull back entirely, right? But we did scale back because it also doesn't make sense to spend a lot of money on marketing when work is walking away from you because you're saying, hey, I'm 10 weeks out. Well, no one wants to wait 3 months or 2-3 months for fence, So anyway, I think a lot of people did the same. And so then when July came and the phone calls really dipped and arguably into August as well, I think there's a little bit of, we should have pushed that pedal a little bit harder. And if it sounds like I'm speaking from personal experience, I am. That's exactly the conversations that went on here.
I get it.
So maybe that's an argument that we need to be better at our forecasting as well, to say we should have pushed the accelerator 6 weeks before that to give it time to catch up with our need.
Yep, I get it.
Tony, let's dive into the report because I think there's a lot of stuff here. One, real quickly though, guys, as you're watching in the chat, I think it'd be interesting to see in terms of demand in sectors, residential versus commercial, et cetera. Where do you think the most demand will come from moving forward? Let's just say residential and commercial. Where do you think the most demand will come from of the two moving forward into 2025 and beyond? This was something that I thought was incredibly interesting, just the results of that question alone. In the chat, let us know what are your predictions. It'll take us a little bit to get there in the report, so you got a few minutes, but drop them below. All right, Tony, here we are, the 2025 Economic Heartbeat of the Industry Report. And then I'll advance these, and I'll let you kind of tell me when to advance them beyond.
Sure. Well, I just thought that was cute, looking at the fencing market. We get blamed to be a fencer ever so often. I said, I was going to ask the audience, what do you think about the market, from a fencing standpoint? Me, I got to have fun doing what I'm doing, right?
Well, I think that's the thing that we all deal with in public when we say like, well, I'm in fencing, or however you say that. Hey, what do you do? Oh, I'm in fencing. And then you have to clarify that. You're like, or at least I do, like the profession, not the sport.
Yeah.
And listen, I do not represent either of these guys in this picture. Like, I don't know what, like, look at me. I'm not built like a fencing sports person. So I think we should all just be very clear right off the rip that we're talking about the profession. But still, those questions come in. They're like, oh, that's interesting. Like the Olympics, like no. Nope. I am in no way, shape, or form. Anyway.
This is true.
All right.
The audience at this point, usually when I'm doing this presentation, as you know, Joe, I'm going to deliver this presentation at the Jackpot event in January, the end of January, for the Garden State event up there. And anytime that I do this, I always say, okay, what's your prediction? We usually have a full house, and everybody's got their own thoughts. Some of the questions that you kind of preloaded there, is it going to be more commercial? Is it going to be more residential? I mean, what's your prediction? Are we going to go up? We're going to go down? What's the percentages? Do you know? So This is just kind of one of those teasers to say, hey, what's your thoughts?
Absolutely. So Isaac in the chat, now he's a little bit biased, but he thinks it's going to be more commercial, more specifically high security commercial industrial.
That is Mr. High Security there for sure.
Yeah, it is too. A little biased, a little bit biased. Sure, absolutely. All right.
The key here is, understanding what inflation and recession does and how it plays into the economic heartbeat. If you'll go through the quick advance right here, Joe, we know that inflation is a rate of increase in prices over a given period of time. We saw that over the last several years. We had a tremendous amount of inflation. The discussion of recession was always on the premises, but a recession can be defined as a sustained period of weak or negative growth in the real GDP. So how does that really relate to us? Well, if inflation, prices are going up, our products are going up, right? If the recession is hitting, then more people are going to be looking at spending for fuel and food and necessities rather than, extra, aesthetics for their backyard, a pool, a fence, a landscaping, or whatever. So it's relevant to understand that inflation is going to impact our industry. And if it gets high enough and those things cost so much that people are got to make a choice. And we all had to do that in 2024 and in 23, late 23, late 24. It was just part of our lifestyle. We had to evaluate, where we were with that.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting just to talk about that. One, inflation's coming, according to the Fed, inflation's coming down. It's not at their target yet, but it's approaching, right? But what's interesting is the economic podcast you listen to, no one has called off the recession talk yet, though. Like they're talking about, soft landings, smooth landings, and all this. But as a consumer, I feel like we're kind of out of the woods, right? It feels like that to me when I go spend dollars because, again, the inflation doesn't seem as high. It seems like prices have leveled off. Those of us that own companies and are looking at the price of materials, we've seen roughly a 10 to 15% reduction in cost on steel products, and specifically pipe and tube. That's what we bought this week. But we're seeing actually price decreases, which that probably influences my thoughts as a consumer as well. Like, okay, if this is coming down, surely bread and milk will be coming down as well, maybe, or at least not climbing.
I agree. I think we've hit that little bit of a plateau where everything's going to start, inching down, as we know, if prices go up, the people that are manufacturing or the people that are providing product are going to say, why should I lower my prices? I'm at this point. We've seen fuel prices come down. I was paying $2.60 for a diesel this week, So Incredible. It's relevant, and we need to understand that inflation and recession is going to have an impact on our businesses. That's the big takeaway that I want our listeners to see here.
Well, and I'm going to come down and move with you, Tony, because it's still like 303 up here. So we're just going to move our operation down to your neck of the woods. But no, that's real though. Is we're seeing a pullback, and what's nice is we're not, like, from the labor perspective, our labor costs are set. Like there is not a conversation about bringing down labor numbers, which means the buying power increases.
Yes.
Right. So if our household income remains the same,
Yep.
but our cost lower, well, now our buying power increases.
Absolutely.
Right? Which
stretch that dollar.
That's right. Which could lead into the further parts of this conversation.
Yep. What we need to understand about GDP, when I put this presentation up, I asked the question, what's GDP stand for? It's gross domestic product, and it's a measure of the total value of the goods and services produced in a country during a specific time period. The key to GDP is understanding that it's a specific time frame, okay? 2024 or a quarter or, a month. We've got to understand what GDP does and how, it affects us. And if in the previous slide, the term GDP was thrown out, and that's how I roll into this piece of it, understanding that it's measure of total value of goods and services produced in a country during a specific time. So that's all I'm trying to get people to understand is what GDP is relevant and what it is.
Well, and I'll say this, I want to highlight goods and services, right? So, and I could be one person that had this misunderstanding going through school, but I always read on where it says produced in the country. So I'd read that to mean like manufacturing, like some sort of manufacturing report. It took me a minute to figure out, no, goods and services. So what we do, building fence, is part of the gross domestic product because we are providing a service and a product, right, and a good into the marketplace. So this is actively, we are part of the GDP report, we being the fencing industry.
Absolutely. A couple of things that we need to highlight here is the global fencing market, in the U.S. dollar is $30.42 billion. That was in 2023. We're expected to grow, again, I said earlier, 4.6 to 5. It's showing a compounded annual growth rate of about 5.6 from 24 to 2030. So we understand that going into next year, we're going to see probably 5 to 6% increase in the total fencing market, by dollars, And then when we see new housing construction, home improvement projects, all the remodeling things, everything that a fence company is looking for to be able to do some work, that forecast is strong. And we're going to see that impact every one of our fence companies in 2025. Another thing about the fencing space and the research that was done was that the growing concerns over safety and security, coupled with the lower maintenance of costs and higher reliability, attributes to the associated with the latest fencing solutions. So now, what does that look like? We've seen a huge increase in energy protection from vandalism, from terrorism, and those type things. So going back to what Isaac was saying, commercial is going to be huge. But yet, the housing market has not slowed down. It may have slowed down in certain areas, but I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. I mean, they're building these things like Legos. I mean, it's just, on every corner, there's thousands of houses. So now, if you're in a residential market or if you're in the commercial market or if you're in both of these markets, based on the statistics that we're fixing to show, you're going to see an increase as long as you're running your business efficiently. You can't just wait for the phone to ring. You got to hustle.
Right, absolutely. Tony, let me ask you a question just here. So we're thinking 5 to 6% overall in the market. So does that mean as a company, so we should be thinking about our company's forecast where, hopefully we've already done that. That's a fourth quarter thing, is try to forecast the following year. So should we look for a 5 to 6% growth in our companies as well when we're forecasting? If I did X in 2024, I should do X plus 5 or 6% in 2025 just to maintain?
I think that's relevant. The clients that Thornton Fence Consulting Group works with, we say, okay, what's your forecast for next year? Well, I want to grow by 20%. Well, let's look at what the global market looks like. It says 5.6, Why don't we happy median this and say, our forecast of growth is going to be 10%. And now we've got a goal. Can we grow our company by 10% total revenue But in understanding what that revenue generation comes from, are you breaking out your financials to understand what your gross margins are on every category that you install? Do you do chain link? Do you do wood? Do you ornamental? Well, if all your revenue is going into one bucket and you don't know what the revenue is in each of these categories, you don't know if you're making money on chain link and throwing, or making a ton of money on wood unless you break these categories out. And of course, if you break your categories out on revenue, you got to break your categories out on, the cost of goods. Yeah. And so many people make the mistake of not putting their labor, direct labor, into the cost of goods. They drop it below the lines, they put it in the expenses, and then you got to go back in and calculate this stuff. But from what directly to answer your question, I would say that every company, understanding this data that we're going to show today, should have a 5 to 6% increase at a minimum if you maintain, if you keep growing. But now, if there's new opportunities in your market, new subdivisions, expanded, commercial work and those type things, go ahead and set a goal of 10%, and man, go after it, right?
Well, I think that's yes. I think that's relevant here in this discussion. The 5 to 6% is to maintain. So if we say 10%, okay, so we're going to find an extra 4 to 5% somewhere. Where? Let's highlight it. Where do we think it is? And let's have a plan for: are we taking market share? Yep. Okay, well, where is that market share coming from? Who's it coming from? How are we getting there? Don't just say, yeah, we're gonna find an extra 4 or 5% just by being here. Well, you don't typically get it by existing, right? There needs to be a game plan. And I think the ones that are set up for success are the ones that say, hey, here's how we're getting, here's where we're going, and here's how we're getting there. We're going to 4 or 5%. There we go. Extra on top of maintaining, and here's the ways we're going to get here. There's extra residential. I mean, in our market, Springfield, Missouri is the same as what you're talking about. In around my neighborhood, there are 4 neighborhoods that have just popped up out of nowhere. Yes. So there's new neighborhoods. Great. Well, what's the plan? Just because they exist doesn't mean you get to build the fences, right? So now we need to have a course of action. But anyway, I thought that was relevant to kind of sit and talk about that for a second. To where if we're forecasting 25% growth, God bless you. That's great.
As long as you know how you're going to do that.
So Ozark Fence grew 26% year on year, but that's because we added a new division, right? That wasn't business as usual. We went and found more.
You added a new revenue stream.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
That's the term we need to use, is you added a new revenue stream. So now defense companies say, I want to grow 15, 20, 25% like my friend Joe did. Okay, what new revenue streams are you going to do? Are you going to start doing pergolas? Are you going to start doing concrete work? Are you going to start doing patios and backyard experience stuff? You've got to find a way to generate that extra percentage of revenue rather than just standing status quo. Well, I put residential chain link in, and that's all I'm ever going to do. Well, you can basically just say, okay, we're just going to be relevant. We're just going to be moving along, right?
Well, having the plan really is what it is, right? And making sure you got the horses to pull the wagon too. Yes. Is say I'm going to grow 25%. All right. So are you planning on adding more team members? No, I think we could do it. Well, so you're telling me 1 out of 4 days in this past year you weren't doing anything? Like you guys were doing stuff all 5 days a week, weren't you? So where's that 25% extra going to come from? Let me tell you, that leads to burnout.
Yes, sir.
And frustration and all of that. But finding new lines of revenue is an accurate way of going and grabbing more market share. Mm-hmm. I mean, Robert Whitaker has been talking about this a lot. I actually just listened to Dan Wheeler's podcast with him, and they were talking about that outdoor space, pergolas, landscape, hardscaping, and all that. Yeah. And so that was an example of him saying, hey, we're going to go get this market, and then we're going to add on to our overall market cap just by adding in this new revenue line.
Yep.
All right. We've put a pin in that for sure.
We beat that one. That's right. Now, this slide talks about some of the market trends. So, again, the home improvement trend, we're going to continue seeing, it pace it, including, home renovation. There's a slide a little bit later that's kind of eye-opening in the fact that, how much new fence is being installed versus how much tear down and replace fence is
Yeah.
being done. I thought that was a really relevant, thing, because everybody says,
Yeah.
I want the new projects, right? At the bottom of the, we'll show that in a minute. But,
Yeah. Well, let's add. So we've kind of given that, but let's ask the chat. So let's check in with chat for just a second.
all right.
So Dustin Hooten. So Dustin's actually in our market. What's up, Dustin? Commercial forecast is commercials more than residential, but residential will also do well if lending percentage rates get or stay lower, below 5 or 6%. And I think that's also something to think about. Is
Absolutely.
that one lesson we're currently learning is that the Fed rate does not necessarily match mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are tied to the 10-year; they're not tied to the Fed rate. So we're seeing the Fed rate come down, but mortgage rates have actually ticked up a little bit.
Yep.
Somewhere 6.5%, 7%, something like that. So I think Dustin absolutely has a point here to where we should also keep an eye on this, to where if you do see rates come down 5 or 6%, that's going to affect a couple things here, Tony. One is new home purchases, absolutely, but two is home remodeling projects.
Yep.
Those are typically financed with a home, a HELOC or some form of home, remortgaging, whatever.
Yeah.
Those rates are typically higher than the buy rate, right? Not grossly higher, but they are a tick higher. So if we see all these rates come down, I think we see new homes being purchased more. I mean, they're still being purchased at 6.5%, 7%.
Yep.
But then also you're going to see more home improvement projects come online if we see those rates come down as well.
Absolutely. These trends are basically just telling us what we already know. The home improvement trend, new home construction, property security concerns. I think everybody's getting more concerned, with the crime rates that we're seeing in some major cities, especially in the large metropolitan areas. If you live kind of on the outskirts, you're probably not as attuned to having to secure property, but
sure,
security and protection of our own belongings is high on the fence consumers list, right?
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about your outdoor living spaces, the hardscapes. I call it the backyard experience. My good friend Jamie Turntine always called it the backyard experience. So this is growing, especially in the larger markets where people are spending more time at home and they want to enjoy the football games and the other things that's going on as a family or as a group, And then the commercial developments, I don't know about you, but I mean, I drove to Denver, Colorado a couple of weeks ago to a consult and back, and the new commercial development is absolutely blowing up everywhere I turn. I mean, in every small little community, there's a new, I don't know, Dollar General, or a Walmart or something. So this new commercial construction is a trend that our fencing professionals need to understand, that if you're not in the commercial segment and you want to add that revenue stream, be careful, but understand that there's an opportunity for you there. So again, these are just some market trends and that really is being captivated by knowing what's going on in our industry.
Well, and I think it also tells us that the commercial, that whether it's manufacturing, retail, or whatever, their high-level thinkers also feel very comfortable about the next decade, right? Because if you think about it, if you've got a manufacturing company, hard cost, so capital projects, meaning remodels or new buildings, those are long-term costs, right?
Yep.
Those are 30-year costs. Typically what they would do, or what I've seen them do, is you'll see either a pay increase, because those can be somewhat temporary. You can adjust your payroll based on your workforce.
Yep.
You can't adjust the size of your building very easily, right? So if they're short-term optimistic but long-term cautious, you'll see payroll come in. You'll see pricing, payroll increases, bonuses, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when they start feeling both short and long-term good about the economy, that's when you see these capital projects come online. What we've been seeing a lot in our area is warehousing. We've seen a whole industrial complex pop up out of nowhere with massive warehousing.
You're going to see that in a data slide here shortly. The warehousing throughout the country is just exploding, and I'm like, my gosh, there's 15 buildings over there that's empty, but you're building 25 more.
Well, I was listening to a podcast that talked about this. So what we're seeing today with all these warehouses came from kind of pandemic era, when they didn't have as much goods, so they started running out of things. There was massive shortages. Mm-hmm. So the ball started rolling then. as far as finding ground, finding builders, waiting for the economics to be right. Like that definitely had to be there. But this is kind of a holdover from that or a result of all of that. But still, I think the relevant point here is some pretty high level thinkers that are dealing with dollar numbers that would boggle my mind feel good about the next decade to where they're saying, hey, yeah, we'll invest a couple $1,000,000, 10 million, whatever. I
Yeah.
can imagine what a whole industrial complex, the development cost of this. There's a few people that feel really good at the high level thinking of, what our economy looks like for the next decade.
Well, I'm going to mention this too. You talk about warehouses. People say, there's not much fence going around a warehouse. But yet your prime warehouses, your, Amazon Prime, they're popping up on every street corner now. They've got a very high level security fence around that. Also, think out of the box. Every one of those warehouses may need an inside partition, or a cage or something that is, sectioning off, these particular warehouses. So again, when you see these things popping up, get thoughtful about, what's my opportunities there. But again, these are just some trends that everybody needs to be aware of.
Absolutely.
These are continued trends here, Joe. Our real estate market activity. We talked about, the building, the construction that's going on already. The new property owners are needing. We're seeing more and more, especially in the large municipalities where, the D.R. Hortons and the Galaxies and those guys, they require a fence to be installed, and they've already made a deal with a local fence company, but then there's a lot of subdivisions that still leave it up to the homeowner, and you need to get connected to your real estate market from a fencing perspective to where you have a relationship with some real estate groups to where you could possibly get in on that. We're looking at our technology advancements. That's the innovation in our fence materials like vinyl and composite materials. I'm also going to say that, we've had a tremendous technology advancement in our tools over the last 5 to 10 years, right? The new post pounders, the bracketing systems. There you go. Evan threw it out. I wonder why, right?
Yeah, right.
Evan and Sean are the tool guys in our industry. But at the end of the day, that's technology that will advance your company and help your company be more efficient and more profitable.
Absolutely.
Everybody's looking for that aesthetic appeal. If you're not looking for just diehard security and protection, and then we also got to understand that there's trends coming with regulatory compliances. There are certain industries, chemical plants, energy plants, and those type of things have regulations that require specific type of fencing. I told you I drove to Denver, and I was amazed at how many marijuana growing farms there were. And every one of those that was subsidized by our government, requires a fence and an electronic beam system, to protect, penetration. Every one of them had a gate operator on it. Every one of them was, 6 with 3 strands of barbed wire. Some of them was do-it-yourselfers. Like I just cringed when I saw some of those fences. But that's a regulatory compliance issue right there, right? So
absolutely,
you guys, you've got to take advantage of some of these opportunities and quit just being narrow-minded on this is all I do. Look for opportunities, and these trends will help you grow into some of those markets, and it'll bring a new revenue stream into you.
I had a conversation yesterday, with a playground manufacturer that's located kind of in our area called Miracle Recreation. They build playgrounds all over the United States, and they're partnering with a foundation to build kind of ADA compliant playgrounds in communities. And these are government funded, at least partially, sometimes wholly, playgrounds. So they're going to happen. Like it's not, we got to find the money. The money's here. We just got to do them. But now one of the requirements is that they are surrounded by a perimeter security fence. Now, and there's 3 options. There's a galvanized chain link, there's a black coated chain link, and there's an ornamental steel option, right? Depending on the location and just kind of what feels right for the area. But I thought it was interesting that now as part of the grant money, they have to be secured. Because in our market, the school district, the school playgrounds are public access. You can, if it's in your community, you can come play with it because, hello, our tax dollars pay for this. Sure. So which makes sense. Some kids were playing on it, as they do. A dog came from somewhere and attacked one of these kids because there wasn't a fence around it.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, over the last 12 months, every public school playground has a fence around it now. Right,
Yep.
because ultimately the school was found liable for that attack because they didn't secure the playground. So I say that to kind of prove out your point a little bit further that, and it's not just these massive grow facilities. These playgrounds aren't going to be huge. I think it's 100 by 100 square is going to be the perimeter fencing.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities out there, even if you're not set up for an Amazon distribution facility, which those fences are incredible.
Yep.
Even if you're not set up for that, there are regulatory projects coming down the pipeline that could affect you as well.
Absolutely. You just got to be aware of these compliances and these regulatory issues.
Yeah. Ike brings up a good point. Data centers as well.
You're going to see that in the data. You sure are.
And you and I are friends with someone that their company does a lot of data centers.
Yep.
And you want to talk about, well, one, you've got to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed, right? You've got to get everything just right. But when you do, it's pretty good work. It's pretty good work because there's a lot of it out there.
Strong profitability too. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And then that follows on to they demand more power, which then we've got more power infrastructure coming online. I was in a CLFMI discussion. It's been a little while ago talking about power centers and about how they're not only hardening the actual power generation sites, but also the substations, right? Because we've seen attacks on substations that do a tremendous amount of damage locally. So now they're going to start hardening those. I mean, there's a lot of fence business coming down the pipeline, I guess is the point.
I had this conversation last week with a client where they're focusing on some of these data centers. And just over the last several years, they've started recognizing that these data centers are actually building their own power supply, right?
Mm-hmm.
They cannot have a terrorist attack or some type of power failure.
Yeah.
So they're putting billions of dollars into backup power, maintain power, whatever, to where that data center will never go down, no matter what happens outside. So it's totally exclusive of what the country's bringing to them. It's their own system, and I thought that was really an eye opener to me.
Yeah. Even if it isn't an attack, just like a brownout.
Yes.
Right. In your neck of the woods, everyone knows the word brownout, right? Is those things are, and in California, it happens, right? So the data centers, but there's going to be data centers that want to be in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, right? Because that's where a concentration of people are. Yep. But anyway, it's not only your first thought of security. There's also all these follow-on conversations that go on that are lending themselves to this 5 to 6% increase, right? Because all of these are coming online.
Yep. It's kind of hard for me to see this data, but this is a fencing market, breakout. And to your point early, this is showing the global market, from North America, Europe, South America, our Asian Pacific, and our Middle East and Africa. And if you look at that, we're playing a strong part of that. North America is playing a very strong part of that. And you see the Asia Pacific area is a huge growth area.
Yeah, I found that interesting.
Yeah. But, what's going on in most of those communities? They're having a lot of problems, security issues, and those type things. It's more commercial driven work there than it is the residential backyard work. The fencing market by end user in 2020, I think that says 28 there. You look at the commercial, industrial, and the other components there. It's relevant. And this is data that is available to you if you just spend the time to go research it. And it's going to help you do a better forecast for growth and planning for your company. This is just a global overview. We don't need to spend much time right here because we really deep dive into the next slides about what the U.S. is all about.
So one thing to kind of look at is the bottom right-hand corner, though, when it talks about fences by application in 2023, we saw commercial outpace residential, which is what we're seeing a lot of times in the comment. We're seeing a lot of comments to this. Again, guys, if you're just joining us, we're asking you to kind of weigh in on what your thoughts are, commercial versus residential. What do we see the most demand for moving forward in the future? Also, we're gonna pause real quick because Ken kind of hit on something that we're going to talk about here in a minute. Last quarter of 24, they just started tracking replacement fence compared to new installs on residential.
Perfect.
So this would be a good follow-on question, guys. What do you think? What do you think has the most demand if we're talking in residential only? Well, or commercial, it doesn't matter, I guess. Are we looking at more new build, or are we looking at more replacement? This is also something I found kind of interesting too.
Yes.
Where do you think the most demand is on those applications?
Again, some additional data, but this is U.S. fencing market through 2023 by materials. When we're looking at the fencing market, we've all seen a huge increase in our concrete, wall, preform, those type things, sound barriers. I would say that that's a huge opportunity for especially those commercial-minded groups to get more, focused on something unique, a new revenue stream. But if you look at each one of these, every one of these are growing. What is it? 5 to 6% every year through 2033. And there's not really one that outpaces the other. When we talk about metal, when we talk about wood, plastic, and composites, they throw the composite stuff into the plastics, PVC, vinyl type, category all in one. But then when it comes down to concrete, so if you look at from where we're at in 2023, last year, year before last, as to see the growth that we're going to be seeing by materials, which is going to be spec'd. There's more, companies getting their product spec'd, which is going to increase the opportunities for our fence professionals to get it plugged in. But I thought this was just a good analytics to show that this trend is upward. It's not up and down, and it's growing about that 5 to 6. And this is U.S. fencing market. This isn't the global market. This is what we're looking at.
And Tony, I think this answers a question I get a lot from guys that are thinking about getting into fencing, and gals. They just said, hey, is now a good time? Well, guys, let's look at 2024 and let's look at 2033. So there's a little bit of growth possibility in the next 9 years, right? 8 or 9 years. So I think it's a fine time to get in, right? If now there's a lot of caveats to this, right?
Yes,
but
sir.
in terms of, because usually the question is, hey, my market already has a bunch of fence companies. Do you think, I don't even know if I should get started. Well, the market's growing consistently, right? So likely each market needs to have additional fence contractors because let's face it, a handful of fence contractors, depending on the market size, of course, can't satisfy the whole market adequately.
That's
right?
true.
They can't service everything. So as that market grows, they're going to need more professionals. Now, the companies will also grow. They'll try to keep pace, or as we talked about earlier, they're going to try to outpace growth. Yep. But I don't think there's a bad time to get in, right?
Nope.
And there's exceptions. There's exceptions for sure. But if you're business minded, if you can run a business effectively,
yep.
I think this is a fine time to get in. And that's a pretty strong qualifying statement. If you can run a business effectively, I think when we see, and Tony, you talk to far more contractors than I do, and so I'll ask you, but my impression is the companies that fail or they close, or fail might be a wrong word, or a harsh word, but they go out of business. They no longer build fence. And my impression is likely because they couldn't run the business as effectively as needed.
There's
right?
No doubt.
So they're great fencing contractors. As Sean says, they're fence ninjas. They're great at building fence, but the business side is lacking.
Yes.
Right. And so that's typically what I see is I typically see that's the reason for them leaving the market altogether.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
So there's that qualifying statement. As long as you can run a business effectively, there is market here for you, and there's market growth here for you.
We're going to say opportunity, right?
There's opportunity. There you go. Now, Tony, I know there's some vinyl guys that are gonna take some exception to being lumped in plastics.
I know.
I saw that in the report. I was like, there's gonna be some exceptions taken to this.
Yeah, those guys will beat us up a little bit.
That's all right. We know what we're talking about here.
We
right?
know. These market guys have no clue what we know, right?
That's right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
This is another U.S. Fencing market data. It kind of couples with that graph that you just showed. The U.S. material will be through 2030 at about 5.3. Now, what did we say earlier? 5.6, I think, was the one on the other slide. And this is two different analytics or two different groups that are doing the data search. Okay, but this is in U.S. dollars by billions. Okay, so you're going to see your metal, your wood, your plastic, and composites, and your concrete again. And I think it's good to look at different analyses
Sure.
or marketing firms to see, how close are they,
Yeah.
and when I was doing my research, everybody had an opinion like we in the fence industry do. But if you look at it from an overall perspective, it's that 4.5 to 4.6 through 5.5, almost 6%, somewhere in that 5% range of U.S. market growth. Now, your comment earlier was 23 to 2030, there's a lot of opportunity. But if you grow your company 5% each year, and you have the resources and the tools and the everything that you need to keep that pace, okay, you're going to have a 45% increase in your revenue, right? So now look at it that way. But again, you've got to support the backside. I can't just say, in 10 years, I'm going to have, a 50% growth.
Sure.
You've got to build the backside of that.
Yeah, but to plan for it, right? Yep. And I think, the easiest way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. All right, so we're going to get here, or we plan to get here. Now we got to figure out how. And the how isn't necessarily only the where are we going to find the work. The how is also how are we going to get that work done in a way that meets our quality standards, that meets our mission, that meets all this.
Yep.
We're likely going to need more team members, right? We're going to need more trucks and equipment.
Trucks,
we're going to need more facilities,
product,
and more office staff, more labor that shows up below gross, right? We're going to need those phones are going to be ringing 45% more.
That's called running your business. Like we said earlier, this is where a lot of, unfortunately, we have failures, or we have the biggest challenges is running that business side.
That's right. That's right. Now, one thing I think that's interesting here that I just want to note is that from 2020 to 2030, in my eyes, looking at this, I see metal and wood losing market share to plastics, composites, and concrete in terms of percentage of that graph, right? Mm-hmm. We see concrete growing, and we see plastics, composites growing. I see metal and wood growing, but if we look at 2030, the percentage of the whole is smaller than in 2020. So I think that's something we need to take note of as well.
And, our listeners also need to understand that when they lump it all into metal, okay, that's all the chain link, galvanized, vinyl coated, because it's metal below it, that's the metal ornamental, all of those pieces of the puzzle, including metal is also inclusive of the aluminum market. So you've got aluminum, you've got steel, and you've got, galvanized steel, materials all lumped into that. So that's that bigger percentage of what you see in that dark, blue or purple color there.
Well, and I'll tell you, Tony, the reason I'm paying attention to it is our business as a whole falls completely in metal and wood. Yeah. Right. All those different versions of metal and then wood. That's our company. We don't do vinyl. We don't do composite. Well, we've done composites, so maybe less than 1% though. Right. Yeah. And we don't do any concrete. So looking at this graph, I was like, hey, this dog might need to learn some new tricks. Right. We might need to add a little bit more vinyl and composite into it. We might need to figure out what concrete looks like. Or what in our market, what that would look like. Now, what's interesting, so D&J Projects, I had them on, it's been a couple years ago now. They're in the UK. They precast, they manufacture concrete fencing, the concrete post, they'll call them gravel boards, what we would call a rot board. So it's interesting to see. We might need to team up with our fencing brothers over in the UK, figure out concrete. I don't know. Yep. But that's what this graph tells me, though, is that if we're looking to grow, one of the growth opportunities is probably going to be figuring out this plastic, composites, and concrete.
Yep.
Absolutely.
This has no numbers on it, but I'm a visual person. And if you look at this gets back to where you were earlier. Residential is going to stay strong. Our agricultural market continues to grow. We've said that for years. We've got some phenomenal ag guys out there right now that are just introducing new technologies and new products and new tools and those type things. But this is a graphic that shows you that, residential is going to continue being, a strong suit because of how many people live in homes, right?
Yeah.
And then when you break out the industrial is what we call commercial fencing.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a small percentage there. But which one of these are going to outpace in your market? And how aggressive are you going to be with any of these? But as we know that the builders market is huge, so that includes the residential. And I will tell you that the perimeter fencing around an HOA is considered an industrial type setup. No, excuse me, it's considered a residential type
that makes sense. Gotcha.
job. Where I would personally think it was commercial, perimeter fence around a huge subdivision development. I wouldn't consider that residential. Yeah, it's going around a residential community, but that's just Tony. Okay, that's just me and a pet peeve.
Sure.
But this is just a graph that says, hey, this is what it looks like going into next year. And this is actually relevant to next year based on the data that I pulled from everybody.
Well, and this starts to answer the question, commercial versus residential, right? We're going to start getting into that, which it's interesting to know no one thought residential demand would outpace commercial demand.
Yep.
That's interesting to see.
Well, there you go.
Here it is.
Can you blow that up any little bit?
Yeah, let's see here. We can do this, but it kind of cuts us off.
Yeah, it's okay.
Nope, that's not it. Well, here, let's just do this. Yeah, I can make it big.
Go. Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect. Look at what's going on there. Residential, commercial, non-building, and agricultural. And go all the way back to 2012. And you kind of see all of those kind of being almost, the same, for lack of better terms, except your residential, was at a higher percentage. 2017, relevant. 2022 continues to grow. 27, which is only 3 years from now, boom. Look at this residential, graph and the data that the projections that, our fencing, not fencing, but our economists are saying is going to continue. Now, what's driving that? I don't know about your community, but we have a huge influx of, foreigners moving into our neighborhoods. Okay.
Yep.
People are trying to get away from where they're living to offer themselves a better opportunity. The United States, of course, is the absolute best place to be. So you're seeing a tremendous amount of new people moving into our communities that are from out of country, which is driving this residential, data completely off the charts.
Sure.
Then you got to make up your mind, are you going to stay in residential? Are you going to do residential? Or, am I going to do a little bit of both? Or am I going to go commercial only? That's a business decision. I've had 2 clients in 2024 completely drop the residential market share in their company because their commercial trends were going up.
Sure.
And the reason that they dropped it, Joe, was because, unfortunately, and I'm going to say that again, unfortunately, the newcomers to the residential market, the newcoming fence professionals coming to the market was selling on price, and they dropped the market out the bottom. And if these companies made the decision, if I can't make money at it, I'm not going to be doing it. I'm not going to fight the battles.
Yeah, that's it, is when you're looking in terms of like gross profit percentage, residential just continues a downward slope because of that. Now, number of projects is increasing incredibly, right? Talking about these neighborhoods. But I tell you, these 4 neighborhoods that are around me, they are, I don't know how to say, they are entry-level homes, right? This is a first home for somebody, likely. They're just, there's no frills, there's no bells and whistles, there's not really a yard to speak of. Entry-level homes, they all have pine on pine wood fences. So pine pickets, rails, and posts. Now, in our market, that's a very economy fence, right? So we would typically do, and actually we don't offer pine on pine. We would do a cedar pickets, rails on pine post, maybe if we're really talked into it. But usually it's cedar materials on steel post, and we do. That's predominantly what we do. So when I see all of these fences going up, and the fact that they're all pine on pine, like, well, those weren't our project to begin with.
No.
Right? When we see all of them going up, I was like, part of me is like, why aren't we building these fences? And then you look at it, you're like, oh, well, because it's the cheapest option available. Like they hired the cheapest contractor to build the cheapest fence. And a lot of times the teams I see building these are not fencing professionals. Meaning, there might be a fencing professional as a foreman, but a lot of it's could be categorized maybe as day labor or just, general labor, something like that. Which tells me, I've got a son that's 7. God willing, he's going to come into this business, so he's going to have plenty of fence to replace here in a little while. But anyway, I think that's a good point, Tony. It's just because there are more residential fences going in, and obviously this chart shows us in terms of dollars. They just shadow everything. Everything else is sitting in the shadow of residential. But you also don't see this graph and say, hey, we're going all in on residential. Exactly. You got to make sure that works for your model and your goals, I guess. Yep. Now, one thing that's interesting to see here, Tony, as I'm looking at it, talking about agricultural. So from 2012 to 2032, I see agricultural almost doubling.
Yep.
Just shy, right? Yep. And so let's not sleep on these other categories either. Mm-hmm. Now, one question I had, what is non-building? I wonder what that category is.
That's a good question. I should have done a little more research on that. We're talking about the residential, commercial, agricultural, non-building. Man,
I don't know.
Good question.
Who knows?
We'll have to figure that out and get back to everybody.
We'll have to reach out to the Fredonia group.
There you go. And they do a good analysis. I've used them for years.
Oh, yeah.
Even back when I was executive director, I used to look at them quite often. So, good data.
Absolutely. Yep. All right. Let's see what else we got here, guys. So this is the question. This was the chart I was getting at when I was asking you guys as far as demand, because I saw this and I thought, wait a minute, like what are we? This is crazy. Because I would have agreed with you guys at the beginning of this before I'd reviewed it. I'm like, oh, commercial by far. We've got, because commercial projects are typically larger as well, both in scope and also in revenue, right? Exactly. They typically have higher standards for fencing. The costs are usually higher, so the final price tag is higher.
Absolutely.
So this was interesting, and it's important to note, guys, this is in dollars. This isn't like by feet of fence or numbers of project. This is in dollars spent on fencing.
Millions of dollars. That's right.
Yeah, millions of dollars. Yes. Yeah. All right, here I'll bring this up big again.
Yep. Well, again, we're talking about just the materials piece and the installation piece here, which I think is relevant. When you look at what your labor or your installation is costing you for these different type of categories, we talked earlier about your revenue categories, your cost of good categories, your metal, almost 50-50, chain link, a little bit higher on the materials and on the installation side. On the ornamental, the material cost is less, the installation is higher. So this is relevant information for you to kind of look at, see what your market bears, what your installation costs are, and how this data can help you better understand. Are you paying too much for labor? If you're using subcontractors, are you not paying enough? But this is an analytics, a data-driven tool that you can take and look at it to say, well, when I'm putting up a metal fence, I need to be almost 50-50, right? So if you're looking at that from that perspective, and we remember the days, where we'd say, okay, my material cost was $2,000, just double that at $4,000, and that's what I'm going to quote. Well, guess what that top line just said? That's exactly what it said. That's the way the quoting used to be done years and years ago. But the nice thing about this data is that chain link is broken out where metal, I told you on that other one, it was inclusive. Your ornamental is broken out rather than being part of the metal piece. So, again, good data, good information, and this is by linear foot, down at the bottom if you look at that, dollars per linear foot.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's interesting also wire and pipe are separated out. So I think each of those would likely speak to agricultural, right? So your wire being your high tensile likely, and then pipe obviously being welded pipe. So Dustin, if you're still in the group, so Dustin Hooten, which in chat, he's in our market. He does a lot of the pipe and the metal. I think this would be interesting for you to take a look at for sure.
What was surprising to me with this one was, I'm a wood guy, I love wood.
Yeah.
And even in vinyl, I mean, we've got some vinyl gurus here on the
Oh, yeah.
podcast today. But when you look at the cost of the wood versus the installation side, I would have thought that would have been right the opposite, right?
Yeah, I
I would have
agree.
thought that your material cost would have been higher than your installation costs on wood, especially on vinyl, as efficient as we've got this system
Yeah.
down now. And maybe we'll see this trend start changing, going into the next few years. But
Sure.
because wood just absolutely went out of sight on costs, over the last couple of years since the pandemic, I would have thought that graph would have been somewhat different. But
Well, and I had that thought about the ornamental segment. Like, our cost, we track costs pretty closely. I don't know that our labor cost is 4 times or 2 times what our ornamental cost is, right? So we see the materials at 20, and we see, installation. I mean, these are probably about 40, right?
Yeah.
So it's like 20 a foot sounds in the ballpark on materials, but 40 a foot for labor cost. I mean, I guess we're getting a steal of a deal. I mean, we're just really efficient or something. I don't know.
There you go.
But interesting to see, though. And this proves the point out, though, Tony, that you can't just do materials times 2, right? Like that, you're going to get sunk if you do that, depending on the type of materials. I mean, you really need to track your labor cost. And I'm a big fan of doubling your cost in general, your overall cost. So your material, but also the cost to install it. Now, hear me when I say that's not your – there are other costs besides payroll, right? So in terms of the burden on the payroll, the taxes, whatever incentives you give your staff and all that is you got to include all that. And then double that gets you to 50% gross. Now, that's not a hard set. I mean, we don't follow that all the time, but we use that as a aiming point, and we know we can pull off of that a little bit, or we can grow a little bit past that. But if you're just starting out, I think that 50% is a good aiming point for sure.
Yep.
All right, let's advance forward.
This, to me, is an eye opener. Okay, This is what we talked about earlier. I'm glad to see Ken mention that he's starting to track this. But in the U.S. residential industry, linear footage, total 428 million linear feet. That's every fence that's installed. 428 million linear feet. Okay, now what's your tear out and replacement? It's 247 million, and your repair and replace is 150, whereas your new construction is only 31 million. So now, for companies, and I tell most of my clients, if the market is good for them, to start focusing on that tear out and replace. Okay. Simply because, there's 20, 30-year-old subdivisions that had a nice wood fence put up. They're going to have to replace that fence, So, position yourself to be able to get efficient at a tear out and a replace. So many people say, well, do I need to pull the concrete out of the ground? Do I need to base my whatever works for you, but do it professionally. But this is relevant information here that I think every fence company can really learn from, and I don't think enough of our fence company professionals put enough emphasis on the repair. 150 million linear feet. That's how many times more than new construction, and how much more money can you make on the repairs? Okay.
At the
end of the day, if you had a fence repair company in every municipality that never done anything but repair and replace, they would be making 10 times more money than any other fence company in the market, because guess what? Nobody else is doing it, and they're going to get the premium dollar amount.
Absolutely. And the repairs typically do lead to the replacement and then lead to the tear out replace. Right. In our experience. And this is what I tell guys just getting started in our market. We'll have them come through and buy materials, and they'll start out with repairs. And I'm like, listen, when I say this, stay in repairs, because your profit margins you will never get a higher profit margin than you do in repair. You just won't. But every time they start growing and growing and growing, they want to go after that new construction because they see so much of it out there. But it's like this chart or these numbers show us like, well, we shouldn't be going after new construction at all. Like, it is the smallest portion of the residential market. we should start at repairs, because a lot of times repairs lead to the tear out replacement, and those two combined are the vast majority. I mean, they're 10 times as much if you combine them as the new construction is.
Well, there's two things that I want our listeners to really understand, that this is the residential market only.
Yeah. Yes.
The other thing is that when we think about new construction, we're talking about the builders, which makes up probably 60% of the fencing space for residential type new construction. Okay. And those guys are going to beat you up down to 18 to 20% margins. And, I'll walk away from that in a heartbeat. I'm looking for that gross margin of 40% or above. So now when you're thinking about the new construction, I'm going to say it's about a 60-40. If we want to kind of throw it out there, 50-50, 50% builder market, which new homes with homeowners being able to, get their own fence contractors, the other 50 to 40%, but that still makes up only 31 million linear feet. Now you put that in dollar amounts, and that's going to drastically throw some very positive information at you. Take these numbers, do your analytics internally, and see where your numbers would be, and all of a sudden you're going to say new construction's got to go, man. I'm tearing out, I'm replacing, right?
Well, and you know what's funny? So we had a conversation with a builder years ago, because they're like, hey, and they weren't an entry level builder. They're kind of they're a little bit nicer homes, and so they want a little bit nicer fence. So I think that's a great idea. But they started doing that game of just, let's try to beat down the price, and like, listen, you don't understand. We're going to build hundreds of homes. I was like, oh, man, I didn't say this, but in my mind, I was like, so you're telling me you will give me the opportunity to do a ton more work at lower profit? Like, I don't think that's as big of a sales pitch as you think it is. Like, I would rather do more work at a larger profit margin than, like, no, thank you. I'll lose all sorts of money on this. That doesn't sound like a win-win for me. But it's something to think about, about.
This is a little bit of a duplication, but we talk about the trends from an installation standpoint, the metal dominance, which is our metal fencing, especially ornamental styles and different type of things that's coming into our market, our vinyl and composite, our security focus, our smart fencing technology. I think this is something we need to mention. Integration of smart features like sensors, automated gates, and remote monitoring systems is becoming more prevalent for enhanced property security. Both residential and commercial. Okay, we're seeing a huge increase in what they've termed smart fencing. We call it the automation or the gate operator, segment of our industry. And then, those people that just have, dispensable income, they can throw it out any way they want to. It's all about the aesthetics. How can I outpace the Joneses down the street, and how can I make my yard look better, or my fence be more impressive? And then the commercial market, again, based on the analytics and data that we've been looking at, this commercial market will always drive, our fence company markets. And the reason I say that is that there's always going to be security for, new building, new commercial. Everything that we do is relevant. If we build a new plant, okay, I'm just going to say, like I know in Jackson, Mississippi, okay, back when the Nissan plant was built, I mean, it generated 5,000 new homes, and 200 new ancillary, manufacturers to provide the Nissan plant with the components that they needed. I mean, this is all relevant from a commercial market growth. So understand what's coming into your community, do a little research, knowing what's coming in, know what the economic piece, is coming in from anywhere, especially if these new plants and things that are being built, because it's going to impact your opportunities.
Absolutely. Hey, Tony, if we can take just a second. So Ike makes a good point. So when we were talking about the non-building segment, you take a wild guess, say it could be infrastructure such as roads, bridges, dams, etc., utilities such as solar fields and other places. I think he's probably right. I think it's probably infrastructure.
It probably is.
Highway fencing, that sort of thing. I mean, think about how much highway fencing there is, whether it's the cable or the rail. I think
whether that's a guess or not, Isaac, I believe you're probably right. You think about that's non-building. There's not a building there, but there's a fence required. So I think you're spot on there.
I think we're going to go with that. We're going to go with that, Ike. That's our answer. That's our answer. It's infrastructure,
Yep.
which probably brings up a point about just infrastructure in general. I mean, the infrastructure bill going through is going to bring a lot of money into the economy as well, and even if you're not into roads, bridges, highway, that sort of thing. To your point about the Nissan plant bringing in ancillary business, I mean, it's going to bring business in no matter what you do.
Yes.
I think. Again, this all kind of leads into the fact that 2025 and on is going to be an incredible economy.
Here's some bullet points of market segmentation. We use that word quite often, in my analysis with our clients. But if you're going to do a market segmentation, you're going to look at it from an agricultural standpoint, a governmental standpoint, military and defense, mining, energy, and power, which is your highest growth opportunity right now in commercial fencing, and then your warehouse and storage. You mentioned warehouse earlier. There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
These are the segments that the economists are saying that is relevant and that you need to be looking at. Now, if you look at every one of those, okay, that's all industrial. I want to make that point. Like we said earlier, the linear footage was all residential. This is industrial market segmentation only. These are the categories, and you need to drill down as to what you possibly want to get involved with and how you want to do it. So just a good thought process.
What's funny, so Shane had a comment that came in as we were pulling this up that was talking about e-commerce warehousing is a large commercial push right now, and which I would absolutely agree with Shane. One thing we're seeing about this, so we're talking about warehousing. One, it'll have a perimeter fence, but what we've seen here is with e-commerce, to Tony's point earlier, they're doing subdividing fences inside. They're creating cages of varying sizes for all these products coming in. We do work for an outdoor company that has a e-commerce component, and their vendors have their own cages for their stuff to go into. Yep. So if I'm going to sell, like I said, they're an outdoors person, so maybe they're selling, I don't know, fish finders. So if I'm a fish finder company, I'm going to sell these fish finders to their customers. I ship these people my fish finders, and then they put them in a cage, which I rent from them, and it's still mine until they sell it and they pull it from that cage. So I think the e-commerce push is very relevant to us to figure out, hey, all right, so this is still a way for us to take advantage of this, right?
And that's going to fall under your warehouse and storage, market piece.
Absolutely, 100%. So let me scroll up really quick, Tony. So there was a question. Where did it come from? Michael had the question. It's been a little while ago. Michael, I hope you're still here. How do you get in contact with companies like Dollar General, or we're talking about these warehouses and interior, exterior fences? Tony, do you have any words of advice for getting in front of the people making these purchasing decisions?
Well, first of all, you're not going to go to Amazon to ask to put the fence up. You're not going to go to Dollar General to put the fence up. You're going to find out who the general contractor is. And for Dollar General and for all these little, Amazon facilities, for the most part, there's only 2 or 3 major general contractors that are doing that work. So you've got to figure out who they are. If you see something going up, stop, get to know who that project manager is, get to know the name of the general contractor, do your due diligence to see how do I get plugged in. So it's the general contractor relationship is where you want to try to focus your contact relationships rather than with the Nissan or whatever. I'll go back to Nissan in Mississippi. Okay, Jeffcoat Fence Company. We did that because we had a phenomenal relationship with the general contractor that was putting that work up. Yeah, they got quotes, but you know what? We were awarded it because they knew that we could perform. We could get in and out. So you've got to chase that down through the general contractors, not the name of the company.
Yeah, and it'd be a good idea just to drive around town, see who's building stuff. I mean, by the time the building's going up, they've likely already awarded all the contracts on that particular building. But if they're building one, they're building more than likely, and figure out who they are. I'll give you this piece of advice too is, so if you do mainly residential, you're wanting to get into commercial, ask each and every residential client that you go into their yard, hey, what do you do? So what do you do around here? Like, because these people are likely in a position to make purchasing decisions. Not all of them, but some of them. I mean, and we've gotten a significant amount of work just by asking that question. So what do you do? Yep. Oh, I'm over at such and such. No kidding. I've been wanting to talk to somebody over there. If I just knock this out of the park and you are 100% satisfied, Would you mind if you just made that connection for me? Because I
Yeah.
could do the same level of service for them that I could for you. Does that make sense? I mean, as long as you outperform the expectations, that's a a dead set lead for you.
Absolutely.
So, all right.
So this is where I get the interaction again. What does all this data tell us? Advance to the next slide.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
It tells us that you've got a plan for your future. Okay. This data is only analytics that's going to help you run your business better. That's the bottom line. Okay. Every business owner is responsible for doing their market segmentation, their market research, determining what markets they want to be in. So at the end of the day, okay, you as a business owner have to evaluate these components. Use data like this. Take the time that I did, pulling this data up and figuring out, okay, if you want to research the concrete market, go after it. If you want to research, instead of just showing up every day and giving the same contracts out to the same contractors to go do the work that you're doing in that market, if you're going to expand, if you're going to generate a new revenue stream, you've got to figure that out. Joe and I can't tell you to do it, and we can't beat you over the head with a piece of pipe and make you do it. So at the end of the day, you got to run your business and be prepared for those ebbs and flows. And there's a lot of phenomenal people out here very willing to help you in any way, shape, fashion, or form in doing what you need to do or pointing you in the right direction. So
absolutely, guys, this would be the point where we would open it up for questions. I mean, obviously it's been open for questions the entire time, but this would be a great time for comments and questions. While we're waiting for those questions to come in, Tony, let's talk about so get plugged in, get connected. Let's talk about where they can do that at. Right, like obviously here, great. I'm going to plug this show because you guys are already watching. But shows like this, right? Dan Wheeler's got a great podcast.
Yep.
Craig Eubanks has a great show.
Yep.
But also, let's talk about physical shows to go to. You mentioned, so you're giving this presentation at the Jackpot Show.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about that show?
Yeah, it's going to be, the Garden State chapter of the American Fence Association hosts this every other year. It'll be at Atlantic City, New Jersey. At the casino there. I think it's the 24th and 25th of January. It's always a phenomenal event. The social hour is absolutely knock it out of the park. But there's an opportunity there to come in and get some education, some networking, and build some relations with some vendors. I would call it a mini fence tech. That's the first one up. And then I think most of our listeners know that Thornton Fence Consulting Group is managing the Canadian Fence Association. If you want an opportunity to go to Canada, February 4th, 5th, and 6th, we'll be in Banff. Okay, that's like Park City on steroids for us guys that know what Park City is all about. That's another mini fence tech. And then, Fence Tech is coming up right around the corner. Whether you realize it or not, it's here, right? So a tremendous amount of education and opportunities to network and set through the seminars. I think AFA's got me doing 2 or 3 training seminars. I hope to, pack the house again. I was so blessed and very, humbled with how many people showed up to listen to the presentations this last year. And I hope that we continue being able to provide and service the industry and being a servant leader, like we focused on. So hopefully this has been helpful to you guys. Okay. Y'all can, take a picture of that little QR code there on the screen, and that puts you in touch with me with anything and everything that we've got going on. And don't hesitate picking up the phone and calling me. Call Joe. Call somebody to get an answer, because at the end of the day, we're all in it together. And if we can build a stronger industry, we're going to build, something great.
100%. 100%. Shane kind of echoed that. Thornton Fence Consulting Business Conference, that just wrapped up. I guess it was only a month ago. It feels like it's been, with the holidays, it feels like it's been so much longer ago, but it was almost literally a month ago. So you hold an annual business conference. So we're a little less than a year away from that. But do you specifically have any events kind of coming up we should talk about?
From a Thornton Fence Consulting Group, we're putting out our new calendar of events on the website this next week.
Okay.
I will be supporting Robert Whitaker at his workshop this next week. I'm going to kick off the 7 strategies, to get that thing kicked off, and then they're going to build on that for the rest of the week. He's got Stephen Covey. My gosh, man, if you guys don't know who Stephen Covey is, coming in to speak, you should be there, is all I want to say. And it's probably not too late if you reach out to Robert. But that's the only event that I have outside the other events scheduled right now. And then you'll have a calendar of events put on it. But we're going to do several what we call Fence Line of Success training seminars next year, which we've always called the summits. We're evaluating the opportunity to bring a lot of this training through a streaming product. Okay, meaning that you don't have to physically be there. We'd love for you to be there. We think we get more interaction, but we're building a platform that hopefully is going to change a little bit of what Thornton Fence Consulting Group has done. New business model, 3rd year in. We keep moving and shaking and trying to bring more advancement to the industry. That's our whole goal.
Absolutely. So Michael's got an off-topic question about temp fence. So Tony, what advice would you have for somebody that's thinking about wanting to get into temporary fencing?
Well, I can tell you, unless you've got to do your market research, are there other people there that are doing it? Because if some of those national firms are there, they've given that away. Okay.
Yep.
So now, unless you build a strong relationship with a general contractor that says, hey, Joe, I got this fence. Hey, Michael, I got this, new construction going around the hospital down there. I need a temp fence, and I know that you can get it done for me. That's the type of temp fence that you want to do. Okay. Yep. It's all relationship based. We know people do business with people, but that's a hard market to break. Okay. And you've got to find those openings and those gaps to be able to squeeze in. But I can tell you that the profit margins are pretty low on the front end because you got to build up your inventory, and then you're going to get that reoccurring every month in order to generate more revenue over the time of those big panels or whatever type fence you're putting up. When you take down an old fence, okay, don't discard it, especially if it's in decent shape, because you can use that for panel construction and or perimeter, weaving with a driven post every 15 foot. So, I'd love to have a conversation with you, Michael. Pick up the phone and call me anytime next week, and be glad to, help you along that way. No problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fair point about the national, the national rental companies. I'll tell you another word of advice is also see if some of your porta potty type companies. So for us, BWI is big. If you don't have connections and you're trying to break into it, they will make it very difficult because they use the fencing as a loss leader into setting up porta potties on site and whatever other temporary services they provide. But if once you break into it, it can be very lucrative. But Tony's words of caution are real because it takes a while to get there. We're very successful in temp fence because we started it 15 years ago. Right, it took a while to pay off the panels and pay off have the lot that you can lay this down on too. Yeah. It takes a minute to get there. Now that I don't think either one of us are telling you not to do it, but just don't jump in, with both feet in the deep end, thinking that it's going to be lucrative in month one. Just know it's a little bit of a journey to get there for sure.
Bingo.
Let's see. So Jared says, thank you for your time. Great info. We're going to hit the ground running in 2025. I love that, Jared. I love to hear that. And starting your year off well, see y'all in Fence Tech in Salt Lake City.
Outstanding.
So talk about starting things the right way. Getting connected with professionals. Absolutely. I love that. Chris is one of our guys. What's up, Chris? Appreciate you joining us. Thank you for watching. Shane says, Michael, feel free to reach out to Shane as well. Words of advice. They have 25 miles of it in stock. Managed to do that in less than 4 years. I love that. And then, okay. So Shane, in his market, a lot of the GCs are dropping the national guys due to lack of service and pricing.
I can see that.
Easy to break into and a cash cow. It takes pounding to pay. Yeah. So that is going to be your unique service, right? Your unique opportunity is saying, I'm probably not going to compete with them on price. Now, it sounds like in Shane's market, they're raising their prices, which is good for everybody. Yeah. But, that's usually our understanding with them is if this is a pricing conversation, I'm not the right one to be in this conversation. But if you want to be able to pick up the phone when somebody drives through this, we got this call 2 days ago that someone had driven into the gates into this construction site, and now they had to drag them open and drag them closed. And here's the great thing about this. They said, I don't care what it takes. These gates have to work. I need guys out here yesterday replacing these things. All right. Now, hear me when I say we're still fair, right? Like you still have to treat them right, but they're not getting bids on this or anything like that. Yeah. So sometimes the follow-on work can be good, but Shane's point is correct that if you can be the one that shows up when the phone rings, when you can jump when they say frog, you'll find yourself with some pretty decent opportunities as well.
Absolutely.
In our market, the national guys, so BWI is local, so they've got guys here locally, but the national rent-a-fences, insert whatever company, they're all 3 hours away. They're Kansas City, St. Louis, and Tulsa. So for them to mobilize somebody and send them down here, it's wild. And so be the service provider, be the leading, the highest level of service is great advice, Shane. Absolutely. All right. Let's see. Hip Square Fence. What's up, guys? Great overview of the fencing market. Your due diligence is much appreciated. I agree. Thank you for educational content as always, gentlemen. See you at Fence Tech.
See you there, my friend.
I love it when people end the sentence with "see you at Fence Tech."
Absolutely.
Guys, we are a month and a half out, but a little bit more. But let that sink in for a second.
This is true.
Less than 2 months.
Hey. I get to just show up now. I don't have to put it on, right? I just get to show up, do my thing, shake hands, kiss babies, love what I do. At the end of the day, that burden is on Michael Reed and the rest of the American Fence Association team. So I'm loving it.
It's got to be nice not to be involved in the flurry of emails of we need to get this figured out, we need to do this and all that. The Fence Tech is going to be where it's at. Shane hits the nail on the head when he says Fence Fam Reunion.
Bingo.
That's basically what it is. But guys, listen, when you're going to Fence Tech, we're talking about getting into new parts of the market, specifically concrete, but also plastics and composites. Fence Tech is a great opportunity to meet vendors and rub shoulders with guys that are likely already doing it. It's a great place to think about adding these to your service offerings, right? And figure out, hey, and a lot of these vendors too are willing to introduce you to contractors doing it, right? It's in their best interest to say, hey, who's doing this? And I'd love to meet somebody, a contractor that's doing, installing your service. Fence Tech would be a great place not only to meet the vendors, but also meet other contractors doing it as well.
I think there's two pieces of the puzzle that, we have to be diligent about. One is that we need to understand our market and what is going to be our differentiator, okay? So how are we different than any other wood fence, installer or chain link installer? And then with that, what's our diversification? Not only differentiator, but the diversification of what we do. How many revenue streams do we offer, our clients in that particular market? So do your market research, see what your diversification can be, and then evaluate what your differentiator is in that particular segment of that revenue stream. And 2025 should be a phenomenal year. Just don't sacrifice your margins.
Right. Well, that's the thing is don't let your game plan be to take more of the market share be to lower prices.
Nope.
Like that is the wrong way. Because again, like let's break that down. Would you want to do more work for less money or less work for more money? Like if those were your only two options, well, I'd rather do less for more. If I got the choice. Now, rarely do we get that choice, but if I had the choice, we'd do that. Or do more work for more money. That's what it always ends up being. But never do more work for less money. Absolutely not. But hey, Tony, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you making the time. I really appreciate you putting together this report. When I sat down and read over it, I was like, oh boy. We are gonna have a show today. Have a show today.
I certainly appreciate the opportunity as always, Joe. My passion is to support the industry, and we together, we're making it better, and there's a lot of other people that are helping us make it better. So we just got to keep that effort up.
Agreed. Guys, again, take a picture of the QR, you scan the QR code, take a picture of Tony's contact information. He's a wealth of information. Please take advantage of this. He is a great resource. My next show will be FinStech. I will see you guys there. If you're going to be at Jackpot, check out Tony. But FinStech is shaping up to be a great year. Tony, I've heard rumblings from a few people that would know that pre-registrations are up significantly from Nashville last year. Which is exciting.
Yes.
It is exciting.
Yes.
Because Nashville was a massive show.
Absolutely.
Like, that's why everyone's using it as the yardstick, is because it was a phenomenal show.
Oh, big time.
To say pre-registrations are up, I think, in my mind, I think it would have been a win if they were the same. It would say, hey, we're going to have another banner year. Let's go get it.
Yep.
To say that they've actually grown, like, oh, we might, there's going to be something here. Like, this is going to be incredible.
Regardless, it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, we'll plan on seeing you there. Again, Tony, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, sir.
Guys, for now, Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences, Tony?
Make good neighbors.
Bingo. I always like to surprise people, see if they'll do it. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.